Alright guys, we've got a little science experiment to do today. We've got 2 tins JSB Express Diablo pellets, the 7.87 grains. These are from 2016. They're quoted as a 4.52 head size, but of course we know that doesn't really mean a thing. But these are known good pellets. I've had a good few sleeves of these and I've been using these through the Anschutz for the best part of 6 years now. But more recently, in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of reports of damaged pellets, squashed skirts. Let's find out how you can get a tin that turns up seemingly undamaged and the pellets are absolutely squashed inside. Is it a case that the tins have been damaged in transit, or were they poorly formed and then packed? What I'm going to do, we'll open up both of these tins. We'll mark this tin A and this tin B. That one B, that one A. Right, we're going to open these up. We're going to carefully examine them and then we're going to repack them. We're just going to make sure that there's no large numbers of damaged skirts in here. They shouldn't be. These pellets from the previous tins that I've shot out of these sleeves have been absolutely fine. They've been quite consistent and well formed, well enough that I've just shot these straight from the tin. What I'll do now, we'll open these up and then we'll have a little examination. Once we've done that, one of these tins I'm going to go and drop from great height, bash the tin up, and then we'll examine them and see whether or not there's a greater number of damaged skirts with a dented tin. The other one I'm going to put in the lathe. Now I've got the 3-jaw chuck set up and I've offset one of the jaws, so they're going to sit in the lathe at a relatively low speed to simulate sort of poor transport, if you like, but hopefully we'll get no damage to the tin and we'll have rumbled these for, I'm probably going to leave it running for 4 or 5 hours, and then hopefully when we come back we should find that there's some damaged skirts in there. Maybe we might well find there's more swarf in the tin, but I'm hoping as best I can to keep this tin undamaged as best as possible. So let's get stuck in. Right, that's tin A. Let's go open that. As I've already said, these are a known good batch. I wouldn't expect much in the way of damaged skirts with these. The reason I chose the Expresses is because they've got the finest, most delicate skirts. So if any of these are going to get damaged, it's most likely going to be these compared to a normal exact, like an 8.4. The tin's nice and clean. There's no obvious swarf or anything from the manufacturing in there either. As with the rest of these sleeves that I've had, I would happily shoot those straight out the tin. So let's just get them back into that tin carefully without spilling them if we can. Oh, it's lost one. Right, I've tried to be as careful as I can with those. I don't think I've dropped any. As expected, that is a pretty nice tin of pellets. I'll tell you what's surprising is that takes a little bit of force to close that lid. That foam in there suddenly doesn't feel quite as soft as you think it does. So there's a chance that when that lid goes on, that could be damaging them. Now I must say, over the years I've been generally quite lucky with my pellets. I've not suffered any with major damage, but a number of people that I know and trust on the shooting circuit have been having some quite significant issues with these, whereas for myself, JSBs and the Air Arms and even the FX branded JSBs, I've had some fantastic batches, but I haven't bought many in the most recent years. So, right, tin B. Tin's quite nice and clean, no obvious swarf or any flashing or anything like that in there. Right, they look fine. So as per tin A, this is tin B. They look in good order. You'd be happy to receive those, that's for sure. Right. I wonder if they actually shake them to level them off before they put the lids on. Right guys, 2 tins Exact Express. Giving them a quick check over, I'm quite happy that they are in good order. I'd shoot those and I have been shooting those. What I'll do, tin A will set that aside, and probably tomorrow I'm going to go and lob them off of maybe the workshop roof. These ones I'm going to set them up in the lathe now. I've set the tailstock up close. There's about 1 millimetre of gap between the lid of the pellet tin and this part here. This is purely just to stop that tin lid from flying off. But as you can see, I've offset the jaw. Right, that's about as low as that will run. So that's probably somewhere in the region of 100, 120 RPM maybe. And mean, that's quite vigorous little jiggling around in there. So let's say 4 or 5 hours. If we speed them up a little bit, that's probably more like 200 RPM, something like that. I haven't got a little dyno to test it. Hopefully that tin will come out relatively unscathed, so it should look as if it did when it was on the shop shelf. Right, I'll see you in a few hours. We're just coming up to 3 hours. They haven't fallen out of the lathe yet, which is a bonus. They are getting fairly vigorously shaken around in there, so I'm not sure what sort of state these are going to look like when they come out. Probably give it another couple of hours and we'll whip them out and see what they look like. Right, we're coming up for 5 hours now. They've been in a long while. I have no idea what state these are going to be in inside this tin. But what I have noticed is there's quite a lot of vibration now in the lathe, so it's almost as if they've got smashed into one lump. If I just speed that up a tiny bit, you probably won't see on there, but the whole lathe is vibrating quite heavily now, so it may well suggest that they're no longer rattling around and they've probably disintegrated. I don't know. I'm going to I'll stop it now. I'll take them over to the bench and we'll see what's going on, but I'd be interested to see what sort of state they're actually in. Right, I've literally got no idea what to expect. That tin looks in really good order. There's no reason to suggest that you would not take that off of a shelf of a shop if that arrived from a mail order. That, for all intents and purposes, is an undamaged tin of pellets, but of course we know different. I have no idea what to expect. They don't seem to rattle so much. I wonder if they've... I haven't actually looked in here yet. Go on, what we got? Okay. That's interesting. So they've been vigorously shaking around for just over 5 hours, and they... Well, they look a bit dirtier. There's still no obvious swarf in that tin. What? They've just lost a little bit of a shine. There's got to be some that are damaged, surely. Other than they've lost their shine, even a courier that thinks he's Ken Block couldn't have thrown it around that much for that amount of time. Surely not. Interesting. Okay. They are in much better condition than I anticipated they would be. I was genuinely expecting these to be trashed. So where do the ones with all the manky skirts come from then? Right, well, we'll have to test the other tin now. I'll go and get that flung off of something, damage that tin, and we'll see. But there really is no major damage on any of those. And that's not what I was expecting. I mean, I've no reason to suggest that these won't shoot. These look absolutely fine. What have we done here? I don't know, but I am very surprised. I can't expect for a moment that these wouldn't shoot absolutely fine. I can't even see a single damaged skirt among that whole tin. Back to Bora. Ready? Oh! Are they even back? Well, at least they didn't explode and go everywhere. It's got a nice little bulge on it. So they look like they're going to be knackered. Right, we're back. I just flung it out my mother's window. I live in a bungalow, so it wasn't quite so easy at home. That's got a nice dig in it. The can's a bit splayed out. Now, if that was on the shelf in the shop, well, look, you can actually see here, hopefully. They actually look like they pressed it out, so it looks like the pellets have actually deformed them from the inside out. You'd definitely not pay for this tin. You would refuse this one. Ooh, right. I can see one squash skirt already. Right, so as expected, this one has a bit of damage. There's a few that are completely trashed. That still doesn't explain how we're pulling out absolutely unmarked tins, how we're pulling out pellets that are absolutely thrashed. Of course, if the tin's gone through major damage, then of course it will damage the pellets, but does that mean that they're not packed well enough from the way from factory to the retailers? I'm at a loss at the moment. There's a lot here that have got slightly deformed skirts. Now there's probably a third of them pellets are knackered, which when you get a tin that's absolutely mint but you've got 20 or 30 pellets that are completely flat, that doesn't line up with this getting major damage. I'm not sure what conclusions we can draw from this for the moment. What's surprising is how vigorously we've stirred up that tin B for no real damage. I'll have to come back to this and have a think. I've sat and picked through this whole tin, so I've separated them off. We've got about 2/3 of the tin have got very light damage, and these would be absolutely fine to use. About a third of them have got slightly more significant damage that could most likely be brought back to life with sizing equipment, but certainly not ideal. Every single one of these pellets in that tin shows a very minor amount of damage. There was, however, only about 20 that had fully flattened skirts that really you'd struggle to do much with. When you look at the bottom of the tin, you can see here that it looks like the dome heads have actually damaged the tin from underneath. So quite surprising. Now, I've got probably more questions than answers at the moment, because when you've got a heavily battered tin, you'd expect that most of your pellets would be damaged, as they are. This one, the tin looks fine, and it's been rumbled for 5 hours. These ones are in very good order still, surprisingly. So there's only really 2 possible reasons how you can get a tin that looks mint and has damaged pellets inside of it. Now, the first one of those, of course, is that JSB put an amount of damaged ones into each of them tins. I personally struggle to believe that one. I've always had very good luck with all of my pellets. Now, the other one, of course, is drop damage if these pellets are wrapped up a bit better than they would be from the factory. Now, I sat and thought about how they arrive from the factory. They are in sleeves, in boxes, on pallets. Now, they don't often have any real wrapping other than the boxes that they're in, but of course pallets don't tend to get dropped very often, and if they do, it's likely that it'll be a total write-off. So the only other option that I can really come up with is that they are getting damaged by the couriers, postmen, whatever, when they're fairly well wrapped from your shop or your retailer to the end user. Now, what I'm going to do, I've now got to do another test. I'm going to use half of these, which are in very good order, but I want to keep some of these for testing, and I'm going to pick out half of this lot. I'm basically going to make up a full tin's worth, decant them into tin B. I'm going to wrap this up in bubble wrap as if we'd bought it from an online retailer, and then I'm going to treat it like a terrible courier. So we're going to go and kick that round like a football, throw it in the back of the van. What then I'm expecting to see is that the tin will look in quite good order, but that additional wrapping around it, I expect that the weight of the pellets, when it takes a decent blow, is what's then squashing them and deforming the skirts. So I've got to try that now. I'm still a little bit baffled, but I think we're a little bit nearer to what's going on here now. Right, so now we've got a tin of the better one. So in there, these are going to be all in pretty reasonable condition. I'm going to tape those up quickly and stick them in a box and wrap them up. Right, I'm going to go and treat that like a courier. Go put some shorts on and go and kick this down the road. Oh look, someone's got a parcel. It says fragile on it. They've obviously got something they really want in there. That's how they deliver them, isn't it? Well, it's a good job I used Royal Mail, because at least it got here. If that was Hermes, we'd never see it again. So this is the mixed tin of all the best ones. Right, I'll have a pick through and I'll get back to you. Right, I've been picking through these for a few minutes. I'm now stumped. I was hoping that this would have a lot of deformed skirts in this lot, and I'll be honest, these don't look really any worse than when I loaded them up. And I kicked that down the road, I stamped on the box and I drop kicked it in the front door. And yet you would, I mean, there's a couple, these may have been missed. There's no really heavily deformed skirts in here at all that I can see. I mean, that shows a decent bit of wrapping on there, because that was well wrapped in the bubble wrap in the box. Wow. So does this point to that some of these were the heavily deformed skirts and the mint tins they were put in at factory? That's not what I was hoping to find, to be honest. Unless I've missed something really obvious here. I don't know. Well, that was all a little more inconclusive than I thought it might be. I was hoping we could say, right, it's your postman, he's smashing them up. Now, of course, there will certainly be instances where retailers haven't wrapped them up particularly well and they have sustained damage by your courier, by your postman and whatever. That can be sorted out. The retailers need to be much more mindful of what they're sending and how they send them. But it still doesn't answer the question of how can you damage some of these pellets without the tins being damaged. There must be a particular area on their route from JSB to you in your country. They must be fine on the pallets. If a pallet was dropped, that would almost certainly be a total write-off. But then, of course, once they get to your country, they'll be broken down into smaller, maybe boxes of 5 sleeves. This, at that stage, the boxes have very little protection on them. This, I would imagine, is when they're at their most vulnerable. If they are not being wrapped up properly, it's entirely feasible that that's when the damage may occur. If they sustain some drop damage, I mean, we would never see a squashed tin on the end unless we were buying full sleeves. So there may well have been a damaged tin on the end that was discarded. Maybe the second and third tin up, they did sustain some damage to the pellets inside and the tins looked okay. This is about the only area that I can suggest that this would happen. I fail to believe, and I certainly wouldn't want to believe, that JSB would knowingly be putting damaged pellets into tins. I've had good luck with them. I've never really had any real issues before. I know various clubs that buy pellets directly from JSB by the pallet load, and they never have problems. So it certainly leads you to believe that at some point from that route to JSB, that route through to the end user, there has to be an area where they are least well protected and are potentially sustaining this damage. And that is as best as I can suggest that that's where it happens, is once they've broken down from the pallets into these smaller amounts. So I think that's probably about as best a conclusion that I can draw from this, really. I've now got a couple of tins of damaged pellets to play with. I'll most likely do some accuracy testing down the line to see just how well these ones with damaged skirts actually shoot. And I guess I'll see you in the next one, guys.